kids. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of MP Vinyl. We took a little time off. Wanted to enjoy the rest of the summer, but here we are. Summer's over. We're 7 months into this pandemic. And now we're rounding election madness. So what better time to get off the news, get off the social media, forget about the craziness and the insanity that's going on in the world, and let's just think about some music. Let's talk music. So here we are. This is episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is episode 6 out of 8. And well, this is, as you can see, this is P through S. And quick, the usual disclaimer, if you've seen the previous episodes, you know this, but I'll go through it anyway, so I don't have to read all the comments. What about this? What about that? These are just my new reissued vinyl. I have hundreds, if not thousands, of my old original vinyl from the 60s, 70s, and 80s back there. I also have, tens of thousands of CDs and MP3s and 8 tracks. So, if I don't have it in here, it's likely I have it in some form somewhere else. So these are just the new reissued vinyls that have come out over the last, 10 years or so. Another disclaimer I should also mention each time I do this, I don't look ahead, so I don't know what's coming. I don't research anything, so I'm going through this with you on the spot, and any information or, trivia or, stuff about the artists or the albums is off the top of my head, so occasionally I may have something wrong. I didn't do any research or homework, so just diving in. So let's get into it without any further ado. Wait, I have to have a pop culture reference. Okay, wait a second. Here we go. So, back to it. All right, here we go. We are starting with Pain of Salvation. Woo! Mr. Daniel Gildenlow. Obviously, I have the utmost respect for Daniel. I took him and Pain of Salvation out with Dream Theater around the time of these early albums from the early 2000s. He also was in my Zeppelin tribute band, and he also was the 5th touring member of Transatlantic on a few tours. So obviously, I have the utmost respect for him as a musician, as a writer, as a singer, as a overall musician. He's just incredible. This is the Perfect Element 1, and I believe they are actually putting out in the next month or so, I guess, a 20th anniversary remix. So, but anyway, this was probably the album that I really fell in love with the band and him. When I heard Used for the first time, I was absolutely blown away. There's a middle section that just the vocals are just building and building and building, and it just shows Daniel's unbelievable, inhuman vocal range. He goes from these low growls all the way to high siren Jeff Tate notes. So yeah, this was the album that blew me away with Daniel's voice. And from here, I became a fan. And from here is when I took them out with Dream Theater for this tour, the Remedy Lane tour. I guess this came out around 2001 or 2002, because that was the tour they did with us. And continuing on with the what they sort of started with Perfect Element, this is another one of my favorites of theirs. I just love every song on here. Fandango and Rope Ends, and the last song, Beyond the Pale, is an absolute classic. This whole album is great, so I highly recommend, if you don't know much about old Pain of Salvation, these are the two that I would highly recommend. And then around this point, well, I'll just grab the last few. Road Salt is a 2-volume set. For some reason, I only have one here. I never got sent volume 2. But this was when Daniel started to really strip down the sound, get very experimental, very organic sounds, and really retro kind of sounds. And then there's this one as well, Falling Home. So this is the only Pain of Salvation I have on vinyl. In fact, I'm going to have to hit Daniel up or hit up Inside Out to update me, because they've put out so many great albums. These are the only ones I have on vinyl, but I highly recommend anything out of that catalog. They just put out a new album, Pantera, this year, which is as experimental as ever. The mix is crazy, the ideas are crazy, and their last album from a couple of years ago was insane with incredible polyrhythms. So Pain of Salvation, if you don't know them, and if you're a prog fan, prog metal, definitely prog metal with a real eccentric, kind of quirky twist. And, when I first heard Pain and Salvation, I kind of thought of them as kind of like Faith No More, in a prog metal world. But once you dig into the catalog, there's just so many different styles. Okay, moving on. Actually, I'm surprised this is in the P section and not the B section, because this is really a Black Crowes album with Jimmy Page, but it's billed as Jimmy Page and the Black Crowes, so therefore I guess I put it in the P section. But this is amazing. If you're a Zeppelin fan, this is a must-own. This was the tour that Jimmy Page did with the Black Crowes, doing a whole Zeppelin set. And the Black Crowes were just perfectly suited to the Zeppelin material. Chris Robinson sounds amazing. And yeah, this is the Live at the Greek. I think Kevin Shirley mixed this, my good friend Kevin Shirley. But yeah, I love the Black Crowes, actually. And there's not only this Zeppelin affiliation, but they also have a Jellyfish affiliation. They did some stuff with the Jellyfish guys as well. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Black Crowes, and obviously, huge Zeppelin fan. So this is kind of must own if you're a fan of either. Okay, we have a giant box set here, so I'm just going to bang out the whole Pantera section in one. Before I show the box set, this is the original cover of Far Beyond Driven, and I remember when this album came out, we were label mates at the time. Well, I guess I'll get back into that. But anyway, this was the original cover, and well, I'll talk about this album within the box set here. So this is an amazing box set, the complete studio albums. It's not really complete, it's the complete modern Pantera from Cowboys from Hell on. If you know anything about the history of the band, they started more of almost a glam rock band. So there's albums from the 80s with their previous singer before Phil Anselmo, and then one last one when Phil joined the band. And it's really a whole different genre. So really, this is where Pantera, as we know them, begins, but it's not really complete. But it's really the only ones you really need if you're a Pantera fan. And this is where it began for most of us, Cowboys from Hell. This came out, I guess it was 91 or so, 90. And I remember getting this. Dream Theater had just signed to Atco Records, which they were as well. We had the same people at the label working for us. And so, Derek Schulman signed the band, and Derek Oliver, and all these, a lot of people we had in common. So I became good friends with the guys around this time because I was just a big fan of this album. And at the time, metal, around 1990 or so, metal was starting to, this was right as grunge was starting to hit, and everything shifted to grunge and funk metal and stuff like that. But this was the big one. This was their second one for Atco Records, Vulgar Display of Power. This is my personal favorite of all of theirs. When this came out, I guess this was 92. Yeah, this came out around the same time that Images and Words came out. Once again, same label, same people, same staff. And this came out a few months, well, right around the same time as Images and Words. But when I heard this, this was the heaviest album I had heard in a long time. It really, grunge had come in, and really even all of the big four metal bands were starting to shift into different directions. And Pantera, as far as I'm concerned, they pretty much kept metal alive in the 90s. I would say Pantera, Machine Head, and Sepultura. Those were the big three metal bands in the 90s keeping it going. But Pantera, as far as I was concerned, was at the top. And this album is just a classic. I even remember on the Images and Words tour, during my drum solo, I had a sample of By Demons Be Driven that I would play in my drum solo. But this is a classic. I mean, everyone. The side A of this is a perfect album side. Mouth for War, New Level, Walk, Fucking Hostile, This Love, and actually I'm surprised Rise is on side A. I remembered This Love being the ending. But side A of this is an all-time classic, and actually I had the honor of playing most of side A with Phil, along with Metal Allegiance. Me and Charlie Benante were the drummers, and it was Phil's first time playing this Pantera stuff, and Rex was also with us as well. So yeah, I mean, I've long history with these guys personally as well. I was friends with Dime, friends with Vinny, and still am friends with Phil and Rex. So yeah, long personal history, but I'm still such a fan of this stuff. This was the big one. This was the first power metal, thrash metal, whatever, speed metal, whatever you want to call them, groove metal. But this came into the Billboard charts at #1. So that was a huge deal when this came out. And this was around 94, I believe. And this one, just following, continuing where Vulgar Display left off, you know, coming out of the gates with Strength Beyond Strength was insane. It's like, you know, what #1 album on the Billboard charts would start with a song like Strength Beyond Strength? It was just insane. But Becoming, the drum pattern on that is classic Vinny. 5 Minutes Alone, I'm Broken, those are classics. This is just an amazing one. It closes with Planet Caravan, their cover of the Black Sabbath classic. Great Southern Trendkill, this was around 97 or so, and metal was at its all-time lowest. I think 1997, was it 97 or 6? But to me, 96, 97 were, 96, 97, 98 were the worst years for hard rock and metal. Even Metallica, Maiden, Megadeth, you know, any band that was in the metal genre was just really, you know, putting out what I consider the weakest albums. And I'll even say the same for my own band. It was even a tough time for Dream Theater that period. So it was a really weird transitional period for all the metal bands, but not Pantera. They put this out and it just slays. It's just classic riffing. And I mean, everything, this whole album is great. And then finally it ended here. This is the last one they did. It came out, I think 2000 it came out. And then they were touring on it in 2001. And I think the tour came down right as a result of 9/11, and that was it. They never played again. So this is the last Pantera album, and I love this album. I think they're just about to put out a special edition of this as well with bonus tracks and all kinds of other stuff. But this is a very underrated album, actually. I think like Goddamn Electric and Yesterday Don't Mean Shit and Revolution Is My Name, Death Rattle. I mean, these 5 albums, this is, you know, pretty much the greatest metal stuff of the 90s right here, you know. So, yeah, there's your Pantera lesson. And, you know, this box set is really perfect. It has it all. There's also a single in there, too, so it's jammed up. Give me a second to put this. You know what? I'll put this away later. We'll come back to that later. Put this down here now. But let's carry on. So we go from Pantera to Periphery. And this is the only Periphery vinyl I have. This is the 3rd album, but I became a big Periphery fan before they were even signed, because Jake is John Petrucci's nephew, and I've known Jake since he was literally 2 years old. You know, he would tour with us, and my family and John's family would share a tour bus, and Jake was just a little kid then. And then as he got older, you know, he started to get interested in guitar and became a really great musician. And then he joined Periphery, and I remember even pitching Periphery to Roadrunner Records, trying to get them a deal in their early stages. But in any case, turns out they didn't need any help from me or John or Dream Theater. They ended up doing so great on their own, and they pretty much were the pioneers of the whole djent, the modern day djent music. Obviously, I think Meshuggah is accredited to, you know, kind of pioneering it, but bands like Periphery, Animals as Leaders, were at the forefront of really making it very, very popular. And you know, they still put out amazing stuff. The band is great. I love Matt Halpern as a drummer. Misha's amazing. The whole band is great. And in terms of this genre, I think they're probably the best of what they do. So we move on from djent to classic rock, you know, starting in prog and then moving into classic rock. I'm going to just pull out the whole chunk right here. We're going into Pink Floyd land. And I mean, these are classics. What can I say? First album here, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, really Syd Barrett's finest hour. This is when they started off. Syd was the leader. He was writing the songs. He was the main singer, even though Roger and Rick Wright also did a lot of singing as well. But really, Pink Floyd started as Syd Barrett's band. He was the genius behind the band, and after one album, you know, everything kind of changed. But this was the one that started it. They were recording this at Abbey Road Studios, I think the same time the Beatles were doing Sgt. Pepper. But this is it's not prog, it's not classic rock. I would say this was more psychedelic rock, their first album, if you don't know the Syd Barrett stuff. So they really started as more of a psychedelic rock band. Then I don't have the next few. Again, I have the old versions. I have Umaguma in there and Saucer Full of Secrets. But the next one I have is a reissue. Here is Adam Hart Mother. A favorite of mine. I love the Adam Hart Mother Suite. It's a sidelong instrumental, so it's kind of strange, you know. At this point, they were going from more psychedelic, more into prog, and I would say these next 2 albums, Adam Heart Mother, and Metal were very, very kind of early prog prototypes. Sidelong Epic on Adam Heart Mother, and Sidelong Epic on Metal as well, with Echoes, which I think is an absolute classic. I love the live at Pompeii version is one of my favorite Pink Floyd moments. But of course, the studio version is great as well, and One of These Days, which is a classic. And Metal really was the precursor to Dark Side of the Moon. But I love this era of the band. Look how cool they were. And this is around the Live at Pompeii era. So if you see Live at Pompeii, it's really the perfect, captures that moment in time for Pink Floyd perfectly, the period between Metal and Dark Side of the Moon. Surprisingly, I don't have Dark Side of the Moon here, or Wish You Were Here, which many people consider the two greatest Pink Floyd albums. And once again, I have it on reel-to-reel, 8-track, my original vinyl. I have it in every other form. And I should mention, I have all the Pink Floyd box sets as well. Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here. They put out some great, very comprehensive box sets through the years as well. So we skipped Dark Side. Obviously, I love Dark Side. Dream Theater covered it in its entirety. Wish You Were Here is an absolute classic. Shine On You Crazy Diamond is one of the greats from their catalog. But let's skip ahead to Animals, which to me is one of my favorite underrated Pink Floyd albums. I love it. I love pigs. I love dogs. I love sheep. It's just a classic album. I even have this on 8-track as well. And the 8-track of Animals has a version of Pigs on the Wing Part 1 and 2 connected as one song with a guitar solo from, I think it was Snowy Shaw. Is that right? Or Snowy Shaw from King Diamond's band. I always get Snowy White or Snowy Shaw. Anyway, it's got a guitar solo from their touring guitar player, and it's Pigs on the Wing 1 and 2 put together. And but Animals is great. They never did a collector's box for Animals. I hope that happens, because they did Dark Side, Wish You Were Here, and The Wall. Skipped over Animals. Hopefully that will happen someday, because to me, this is such a classic. And the box set for Wish You Were Here has great early live versions of a few of the songs when it was Raving and Drooling, and I forgot what the other working title was, but it's basically Dogs and Sheep, the original version. So you can get that on the Wish You Were Here box set. Well, here, what can I say about this that I haven't said already in other interviews and things? This is one of my all-time favorite albums ever. Number one, possibly. It's one of my favorite concerts I've ever seen of all time, one of my favorite movies I've ever seen, and one of my favorite albums. I think The Wall is an absolute masterpiece from start to finish. It's Roger Waters' epic magnum opus. I actually have a copy of it over there signed by Roger Waters and Nick Mason. I got to meet Nick and Roger many, many years ago, and actually went to their sound check at Madison Square Garden, sat next to Nick Mason at his drums while him and Roger were sound checking, playing Comfortably Numb and Shine On You Crazy Diamond. It was surreal. But in any case, they both signed my copy of The Wall, and I really regret, because a few months later, I saw David Gilmour play at Radio City Music Hall with Rick Wright in the band, and it's like that would have been the opportunity to get the other two to sign it. And of course, Rick Wright's no longer with us, so missed that opportunity. But back to the album. Masterpiece from start to finish, and I've covered so much of this, mainly with Dream Theater. We did In the Flesh, we did Hey You, we did a little bit of Run Like Hell, did Comfortably Numb, of course, with Sons of Apollo. So yeah, I mean, I've covered so much of this album, and it's just from top to bottom a masterpiece. Then we move ahead. I don't have the Gilmour-led albums. I wasn't so crazy about Floyd in the late 80s. It's weird. With Floyd, you had the period where Sid was the leader. Then you had all the 70s into the early 80s where Roger was clearly the leader. And then once Roger left, it became Dave's band, and he was the leader. So there's three very distinctive periods for Pink Floyd. Roger is my hero. In the argument of Roger versus Dave, I'm always a Roger guy. But of course, I love and respect Dave as well. But definitely a Roger guy. All my favorite albums was his era. But this was the last real full-length album they did, The Division Bell. Not one of my favorites, but there's a lot of good stuff on here. And I think as far as the Gilmour era stuff, this is probably my favorite of his era. And, this is Division Bell. And then this was the album they put out a few years ago, The Endless River. And I remember I made a comment online about how dare They put out a new Pink Floyd album when Rick Wright isn't even alive and Roger's not in the band. But shame on me, I should have known the facts first, because it turns out this is an amazing album, and it wasn't a new album. This is made up of all outtakes and jams from the Division Bell sessions. So really it is still Dave, Rick, and Nick, who were Pink Floyd, you know, all those final years. And this is almost like they go back to their prog roots, because it's very psychedelic, very prog, very moody and ambient. So after all was said and done, it's almost like they kind of came full circle with the very, very last release, doing more kind of Pompeii kind of jamming and different kind of ambient kind of music. So I thought this was actually a great kind of coda to the band. And I assume this is where it ends for them. I don't know if there's any future plans, but here's your Pink Floyd lesson. Putting these back is always the hardest part. All right, so we move on to, well, you could probably guess what's next, Porcupine Tree. And this is the only Porcupine Tree vinyl I have, although I have all the rest of their stuff elsewhere. But this was the Dead Wing album, and I love Shallow and Lazarus and Arriving Somewhere. I mean, this is a great, great album, really is. And I think, yeah, by this point, Gavin Harrison was in the band. Porcupine Tree toured with Dream Theater in 2000, and it was before Gavin was in the band. Chris Maitland was the drummer, and I was a big fan of them then. I loved them. They were very Pink Floyd in those early albums and when they toured with Dream Theater. But once Gavin joined the band, it kind of went up a few notches, and the musicianship really stepped up, and just tasty, tasty stuff. This is a great album. I love all of them, actually, and I love all of Steven's solo work as well. I guess we'll get to that later. But yeah, big Porcupine Tree fan, big fan of Steven Wilson, and I guess this is probably a good point to throw out the challenge. Okay, Steven? As many of you know, myself and Michael Ackerfeld and Steven Wilson, many, many, many years ago, talked about maybe doing something, and then it kind of fizzled out. And then me and Michael Ackerfeld and Devin Townsend started talking about doing something, and then that ended up not happening. So I often get asked, what is your one remaining unfulfilled project? And even though I am so fulfilled with everything I've done, I would say I still have this dream band in my head of myself, Steven Wilson, Michael Ackerfeld, and Devin Townsend. That is my dream lineup for my last unfulfilled project. I almost feel like putting it on the internet. I could take this clip and put it on the internet and throw out the challenge to those guys, like almost dare them to do it. The 3-week challenge. Just put us in a studio together for 3 weeks and let's see what comes out. So I honestly don't think it will ever happen. I think all three of those guys are very, very happy working on their own and being in control and not kind of collaborating. I don't know if that's their thing, but I do have this dream in my head that it would be an amazing combination of people to work with. So anyway, that's my unfulfilled dream. And why, now that I'm thinking about this, okay, I was gonna say, why is Steven Wilson in here? But I'm realizing we're talking about Porcupine Tree. So there you go. There's your Porcupine Tree, Steven Wilson portion. Next up is one of mine. This is PSMS, or technically it's Portnoy, Sheehan, McAlpine, Sherinian, but we just call it PSMS. This was a fun lineup that I put together just to have fun, just to go out there and play instrumental music, stuff from all of our past. There's some Dream Theater instrumental music, some LTE instrumental music. There's Tony McAlpine's instrumental music. There's Derek's Planet X instrumental music. Billy and Tony's stuff from Edge of Insanity. So this tour was great. It just had a little bit of each of our, discographies put together, all the instrumental music. And also we did a lot of covers. We did some Jeff Beck. We did some Tallis. So, it was really kind of just more of a fun prog fusion instrumental band. And what a lineup. Just an amazing lineup. And then from here, many, many years later, myself, Derek, and Billy put together Sons of Apollo. And then even this latest Sons of Apollo tour, we had Tony as the opening band. So, it's all still part of the family. But this is a great, great instrumental live album of all of ours. My favorite thing on here is the Apocalypse 1470 BC, which was one of Derek's songs for Planet X. And when we got to play it, it's insane tune. And now here we go. Yeah, boy. Flavor Flav. Well, here we go. These are two mandatory hip hop right here. Two Public Enemy albums. The first one, I don't have the first one on vinyl, but this is the second and the third, and these are both absolute classics of the time. Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back is obviously Bring the Noise and Don't Believe the Hype. She watched Channel Zero. I have a funny story seeing, I guess I saw the Clash of the Titans tour. It was Anthrax, Slayer, and Megadeth, Alice in Chains at the Garden. And Slayer was playing Rain and Blood, and just so happened that Chuck D was standing next to me. And they go into the middle section of Angel. Oh, did I say Rain and Blood? I meant Angel of Death. So they go into Angel of Death, and Chuck is next to me, and they go into that riff, which is in She Watched Channel Zero, and it was just really funny to share that moment with him. But yeah, I love this album. And then this, the third album, Fear of a Black Planet, as opposed to Porcupine Tree's Fear of a Blank Planet. This is actually my favorite PE album. As much as Nation of Millions is probably considered the classic quintessential, Fear of a Black Planet was, when this came out, I was just all about this album. And you can actually hear, I sampled Chuck D on the beginning of Take the Time, along with the Beastie Boys and Frank Zappa and stuff. But yeah, I mean, this period, when this came out, 90, 91, I was a huge Public Enemy fan. Saw them live many times during this period. And, well, hell's breaking loose upstairs. Even saw Public Enemy as recently as a few years ago when I was in Sweden with Twisted Sister, and they happened to be playing, and we went and hung out with the guys and saw the show, and it was a venue in Gothenburg, Sweden, which to this date is the last live performance I ever played at that same venue in Gothenburg. This past year with Sons of Apollo, it was the last show before the tour came down. But anyway, old school hip hop, two absolute classics. Moving on, we're actually, all hell's breaking loose up there. Moving on into the Q section, these next four are all very red. Look at that, a lot of red. But this is Queens of the Stone Age, and actually, it wouldn't have been all red because the original one of this is actually rated R, which was blue, but this is the vinyl version, rated X, which is red. I love Queens of the Stone Age, but actually these two are my favorites right here. This Songs for the Deaf is with Dave Grohl on drums, and love this album. Some of my favorite Dave Grohl drumming. And then this one, Like Clockwork, came out a few years ago. It has a song on there. Sorry. The song, what's the name? The Vampire of Time and Memory. All-time favorite song. So good. And I love Queens of the Stone Age. I just love, they just have a real organic, kind of like organic retro sound mixed in with like kind of, stoner rock. Obviously they're kind of from the stoner roots, but a big fan of those guys. All right, we got some big ones coming up here. These are huge ones, actually. Let's start with just these two. What can I say? Earlier talking about Takes a Nation of Millions and Fear of a Black Planet being an amazing second and third album. Well, this might be the best second and third album ever made. I don't have Pablo Honey, which was Radiohead's first album, but when they came out with I was a big fan of Creep, obviously, from the first album, but when they came out with the Bends, every song after song, Fake Plastic Trees, and My Iron Lung, and Street Spirit, and the Bends, this is an album, this was like their real guitar album. Great songs. Tom York's melodies are just so unique. And then came this, and I kind of equate this to, this is kind of like Revolver, and then this is their Revolver, this is their Sgt. Pepper. Amazing songs, but then by the time they got to OK Computer, you watch this series, and I say, this album's one of my favorites of all times, and this is in my top 10. This really is in my top 10 of all time. One of my favorite albums of all time. An absolute classic from start to finish. From the opening moments of Airbag to the very end of The Tourist. Every song on here. Paranoid Android, masterpiece. Exit Music for a Film, masterpiece. Karma Police, No Surprises. Every one of these songs, oh my God. I think Exit Music for a Film might be one of my favorite written songs of theirs. It's just perfect. But every song on this album is perfect. And there's very few perfect albums in my book, and this is absolutely one of them. This was the Sgt. Pepper for the next generation. This came out in 97, so it was 30 years after Sgt. Pepper, so it was kind of like the next generation's version of Sgt. Pepper, and it deserves that acclaim. Amazing. Both of these albums are so good. Then they came out with these two, Kid A and an Amnesiac, and how do you follow up OK Computer? It's impossible to follow up such a classic album. Kid A came out, and at first I was really thrown by how weird it was, and then this came out, and then it went even weirder. I think as time has gone on, not coming off the OK Computer expectations at the time. At the time, it might have been a little disappointing, but now, now with some, many, many years, decades since this, now you kind of see where it sits in the catalog, and I think I can appreciate both of these albums a lot better now. By the way, these are like 10-inch, special 10-inch versions, and I think they play on 45. And then this was the one that came out a few years ago, Moonshaped Pool. I thought this was a great return to form in a lot of respects. As much as I love the Bends and OK Computer, I will say Radiohead kind of lost me. I think they just went a little too deep and too far into the electronica stuff and the weird stuff. I think what made the Bends and OK Computer so great is they were just great songs and with guitars, and they could be played as a band. I think they got a little too deep into the electronica stuff, but just for my personal taste. But in any case, I like this last one. It was a great one. So there you go. That's Radiohead. And now, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here they are, the Ramones. Or actually, they're not the Ramones. They're just Ramones. If you look at any of their albums, there's no the. Same with like Scorpions. It's just Scorpions. Well, it's just Ramones. Look, these first three are absolute classics, and I have them in. Well, this is the original reissue, but then all of these were kind of reissued as box sets. These are kind of like 40th anniversary deluxe boxes with CDs and bonus stuff and live stuff and great liner notes, alternate mixes and stuff. So I would say, this is the quintessential Ramones right here. These three, the first three, which are all Joey, Johnny, Dee Dee, and Tommy on drums. And unbelievable to me that all four of these guys are no longer with us. It's crazy that all four of the original Ramones are gone. Horrible. But yeah, I was a huge Ramones fan. When they came around, late 70s, early 80s, I went through a huge Ramones phase. And you probably have seen it. I've posted the picture a million times of me as a kid with when I got to meet the four of them. But it wasn't with Tommy. I met them and got really into them once Marky joined the band. So these first three are the classics. Those three, it's just mandatory Ramones. And then this is Road to Ruin. This was their fourth album, and then this was when Marky joined the band. And when I went through my big Ramones phase in the early 80s, Marky was in the band at that point. And that's when I used to see them live. I saw them live so many times back then when I was a kid. And in any case, I went through a huge phase. I loved the Rock and Roll High School movie, big fan of that as well. And I recently did a cover of We're a Happy Family when the quarantine began. I also have another Ramones cover waiting on deck for me to finish it. So that'll be coming soon. And it's something from this album, actually. Actually, I think it's from this session. It's the song I still have to cover. It was in Rock and Roll High School, but I think there's also alternate versions and demos of it on here. But anyway, from this era. So there's the Ramones. Next up is the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and I'm a big fan of all their early stuff, but the only one I have on vinyl is this, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, which I think it just celebrated its 29th anniversary a few weeks ago, which is insane. But this was the first one they did with Rick Rubin, and this was the one that really broke them open. I mean, I guess they got even bigger with the records that followed. They got more commercial, mainstream. But this was my last real favorite Red Hot Chili Peppers album. This is my favorite of theirs, the one they did with Rick Rubin. I also love Mother's Milk, the record that came before this, which I think was Chad's first album with the band. But this is the one for me. I think every song on here is great. I love the production. It's just one of my favorite Rick Rubin produced albums. Much respect for them. Moving on into Progland, these next few are Riverside from Poland. Great progressive band from Poland. If you follow the prog scene, you know who they are. Inside Out Act. They were on my Progressive Nation at Sea tour cruise, and they actually opened for Dream Theater a bunch back in the day. So yeah, great prog coming from Poland. and very much like in the Porcupine Tree vein. If you don't really know them, kind of, I would compare them to like Steven Wilson, Porcupine Tree kind of stuff. But great stuff if you don't know them. We're now going to Stones Land, and I only have four Stones albums here. I obviously have their whole catalog elsewhere, but in new vinyl, to me, this is the period. This is the era. Satanic Majesties, Through the Past Darkly, Let It Bleed, and Sticky Fingers. I know that the Stones purists swear by Exile on Main Street. I like Exile, but it's not in my top three. My top three, well, this one's the greatest hits album. But to me, as far as Stones albums go, these are my top three. And believe it or not, this is my number one. Most people, or most Stones fans, hate their Satanic Majesties request. This is my favorite, believe it or not. And I actually have it on 8-track. I have it on reel-to-reel over there. And I have this with every different variation of the cover. This was the last box set that came out, which was really cool, really well done. But yeah, I grew up with this album. You know, when I was I just have a real emotional attachment to it, a nostalgic attachment to it, just because I remember when it came out and I was a kid and I was listening to, you know, the Beatles, and I was listening to, you know, Tommy by The Who. And at that same time, this was a big one for me. And I love the songs in this. I mean, I love 2000 Man is obviously great. You know, Kiss did that. She's a Rainbow is a classic. 2000 Light Years from Home, I love. On With the Show, I love. Citadel, I love Citadel. It's like the first Stones heavy metal song. I think Red Cross even covered that as well. But yeah, I'm a huge Satanic Majesties request fan. I actually have some great bootlegs of the sessions. I have like a 12 CD box set of all the sessions and outtakes from this album. But I know I'm crazy, but it's my favorite Stones album. This one is great. It's just got all the mid to late 60s singles on here. Honky Tonk Woman, Ruby Tuesday, Jumping Jack Flash, Painted Black. And I love the Octagon cover. I remember having that when I was a kid, and when they reissued it with the Octagon cover, I had to get it. By the way, I always thought Mick Jagger does not look like Mick Jagger there. I always thought that it just is so... I mean, obviously I know his nose is crushed. I mean, Keith looks like himself, and Charlie and Bill and Brian, but yeah, it doesn't look like Mick. But anyway, in any case, I digest. And Let It Bleed, this is probably my second favorite Stones album. Everything on here. Give Me Shelter, Midnight Rambler, Monkey Man. I love Monkey Man. Can't Always Get What You Want. I mean, it's just a classic, and I love the cover. I remember as a kid, I would just look at this cover over and over, and then the back cover, it's just such a classic. And Sticky Fingers, really, also just a perfect album. Brown Sugar, Bitch, Wild Horses. I mean, this is just another. I love Can't You Hear Me Knocking. So yeah, these are my favorite Stones albums. I'm not the biggest Stones fan. I mean, I put Beatles and Floyd and The Who and Zeppelin above the Stones. I think the Stones would probably be number 5 in the Big Five for me. But these particular albums in this particular era from 67 to 71, to me, are absolute classics. And I know most people would continue with Exile and maybe even Goat's Head Soup, but that's it for me. And now I'm really going to disappoint a lot of you out there. I think a lot of you are waiting for me to get to the R section for this. And you're going to be disappointed how little Rush I have on reissued vinyl. This is it. 2 of which are not even legitimate albums. So I hate to disappoint you all, but once again, if you saw the disclaimer at the beginning, you know I have them all back there from the originals. I have them all in CD. And, you know, obviously my love for Rush is so well documented. They're one of my favorite bands of all time, my biggest musical heroes. Neil is obviously one of my favorite drummers of all time. So obviously I know every album inside and out, but the only ones I bought in the new reissues were these. I bought the first album reissue because they put out a box set, so I picked it up. But obviously, this is the first album with John Rutles on drums. It was a little different band. They really weren't prog yet. They were more like Zeppelin and classic rock. This is a great bootleg vinyl I have from them in '74 at the Agora Ballroom in Cleveland. This was a radio broadcast they did shortly after Neil joined the band, and this is classic stuff. It's great to hear the first album stuff with Neil on drums, but then they cover Bad Boy, and then the early stuff that wasn't even released, like Garden Road and Fancy Dancer. So if you don't have this, this is absolute classic early Rush bootleg. You don't have to have it on vinyl, just find it online somewhere. It's so good. And then I don't have Fly By Night and Caress of Steel here, but we move on to their fourth album, 2112. I also have a copy hanging over there, signed by all three of them. All three of them signed my original 2112, so this is the reissue. I had to buy it because my original's hanging up. You know, what can you say? Classic album. This was what changed everything for them after almost breaking up after Caress of Steel. The title track is a classic. Passage to Bangkok is classic. I love Tears. I covered Tears with Dream Theater. What can I say? Classic. Don't have Farewell to Kings or Hemispheres, which are two of my all-time favorite Rush albums, but they're just not here in the collection. But I do have the reissued box sets and things like that, but not on vinyl. This is probably my favorite Rush album, Permanent Waves. From start to finish, a classic album. Talking about classic albums, this is a classic. And I would say the same for Moving Pictures, which is not here. So I would say Permanent Waves, Moving Pictures are really as close to perfect Rush albums you can get. Every song. But let's talk about Permanent Waves. I mean, Spirit of Radio, Free Will, Jacob's Ladder, Natural Science. I mean, it's just absolute Rush at their best, at their most. I mean, Hemispheres and Farewell to Kings were their most progressive, but this was the perfect album to go from Hemispheres to lead to Moving Pictures. You know, this kind of has a little bit of the best of both worlds, the prog side and then the more mainstream sound that they were getting, but still being very, very progressive. And then this last one is this is the vinyl, the bonus vinyl that came in the new Permanent Waves box set, the 40th anniversary, and it's just a live show from 1980, and you know, this is just my favorite era of Rush. Any of these live recordings between 77 to 82, it's just every song is just great. It's just perfection. So in any case, I hate to disappoint you Rush fans that I don't have more, but those are the to me the mandatory ones of the reissues. And we only have 3 left, and this one this is, I know I say it about so many, but this is an all-time favorite. I'm a huge Rutles fan. I love the Rutles. I remember watching this on TV when it aired on ABC back in 1978. So I was 11 years old, and we didn't have videotapes yet. We didn't have, video stores. So I remember it was a huge event that there was going to be some sort of Saturday Night Live, Monty Python affiliated Beatles parody coming on. I was 11 years old. I watched it when it came out, and this was the first like mockumentary I'd ever seen. You know, this is pre-Spinal Tap. Now, you know, you see documentary now or all these other, you know, mockumentary shows or rockumentary shows, and you know, it's been done to death, but the Rutles did it first, and it was just so well done. Eric Idle and Neil Innes. I mean, you know, Neil wrote the music, and he played Ron Nasty. Eric, I think, did most of the writing of the storyline, and he played Dirk McQuigley. So it's Ron Nasty, Dirk McQuigley, Stig O'Hara, and Barry Wham. and every song on this album is perfection. Piggies in the Middle, Cheese and Onions. I love them all. There's no track listing here, but off the top of my head, Number One, Ouch, Get Up and Go. I mean, every one of these songs were like parodies of Beatles songs, but they weren't direct rewrites. They kind of just took the flavors and the chord progressions and the production and kind of made their own songs, which is what made it so genius. So I had to have this on vinyl. And once again, I have a sealed 8-track of the first Rutles as well. But yeah, if you don't know the Rutles, you need to know them. And 2 left. This is a classic. Never Mind the Bollocks. Here's the Sex Pistols picture disc. The only real album the Sex Pistols ever put out. I mean, there was a lot of compilations that came out, Great Rock and Roll Swindle, things like that. But this is it. This was the only album, and this was with Sid on bass. Obviously, they were around for a couple of years before this, writing these songs with Glenn Matlock on bass. But Sid joined the band. They put this out, and it pretty much changed everything. This was like the Nirvana, if you look at the Nirvana album, the classic one from 1991, this was kind of like that version of, when this came out in 77. Yeah. And I got this when I was a kid, when I was around 10 years old when this came out. And I remember my dad turned me on to it because it was just, they were the talk of the town. The whole punk rock movement was coming out. And, they were just kind of them. They were leading the way. And then there was the Clash as well. From for me, the big three of punk rock from back then were the Sex Pistols, the Clash, and the Ramones. And looking at it now, the Ramones were more punk just in terms of fashion, but not really music. You know, they were kind of more a blues, you know, Ramones were kind of bluesy, whereas Sex Pistols were really, really angry punk rock, rebellious punk rock. And then the Clash were a little bit more reggae driven. So really out of those big three very different styled bands as well. But I love the Sex Pistols. I got to see them many, many, many years later when they did a reunion tour in the late 90s, obviously without Sid. Glenn was back in the band, and, you know, it wasn't the same, obviously, but it was just really cool to have seen them. And, you know, every song on this album is a classic. And last but not least, this is an obscure one. You're probably not going to know this. This is by a band called Sinoia Caves. And this is the soundtrack to the movie Beyond the Black Rainbow. Now, if you saw one of my previous MP Vinyl episodes, I talked about the Mandy soundtrack. And this is the same film director. Before Mandy, he made Beyond the Black Rainbow. And when I saw this, it's a total trip. The whole movie is very psychedelic, very hallucinogenic. It's just very trippy. It's like as if Stanley Kubrick directed, you know, Eraserhead or something like that. You know, really beautiful to look at, but really trippy. But in any case, the soundtrack was incredible, so I had to pick this up because it was just so Pink Floyd-ish. Really very, very Pink Floyd, the soundtrack. So check out the movie Beyond the Black Rainbow and check out the soundtrack while you're at it. And there you go. P through S, MP Vinyl, episode 6. Hopefully I got my facts straight. Once again, I just do it off the top of my head. And hopefully I talked about some of your favorite albums, and even more importantly, hopefully I talked about some albums that you don't know, and now you can go check them out. So really, that's the fun of this sort of, this series, is getting to maybe introduce you to some music that you weren't aware of, because everything here is great. As you can see, I love it all. And, you know, the diverse taste is really the key to good music. You know, you really to have everything from the Sex Pistols to Pink Floyd and everything in between. All right, well, there you have it. I don't know when I'm going to do the next episode, but we have 2 more left after this. I'm looking down there. One begins with S, with Slayer. So we'll start with that in the next episode. But in the meantime, happy listening. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Stay sane. You know, between the pandemic and the election, it's a crazy world out there right now. So try to keep your head on straight. Stay positive. Be nice to people. There's so much negativity out there right now, and confusion and anger. So listen to some music, take your mind off of that crap, and let's get through this, and I'll see you next time. All right, happy listening.